in Cuba, they refer to the methods that Cuban political refugees used to travel to the United States. The word balsero is a Spanish term that literally means ferryman. The United States has been a welcoming ground to millions of people, the Cubans being a significant part of that. The Cuban Adjustment Act of 1966 allowed Cuban immigrants or political refugees to stay in the U.S. and after 1 year, gain permanent residence. Upon arrival, these immigrants receive work permits, social security numbers, and welfare benefits. This act was made to protect the persecuted in Cuba, or those in fear of it. The basis of persecution in Cuba ranged anywhere from race, religion, nationality, political opinion, and or membership in a certain social group. Cubans risked their lives by making the 90-mile trip to the south coast of the U.S. Many suffered heat stroke, sunburn, dehydration, sharks, capsizing, and drowning, all on an assembled makeshift boat. They of course also ran the risk of getting caught by the U.S. Coast Guard, which led to being sent back to Cuba and possibility of persecution. By 1994, the number of Cubans making their way to the U.S. reached an all-time high. On August 22, 1994, 1,500 Cubans that were bound for Florida in homemade rafts found themselves at a military camp on an island, captured as political ties. 30,000 Cubans in total were detained in Guantanamo, Cuba. 95% of immigrants from the Balseros generation have relatives still living on the island. The number of rafters in the early 90s was seen as an escalating crisis. In 1990, a few hundred Cuban rafters were rescued by the U.S. Coast Guard. In 1991, it rose to 1,936. And in 1992, it was 2,336. Finally, in 1993, 3,687. Castro claimed that the U.S. encouraged flight from Cuba. He retaliated by sending 30,000 Cubans to America on vessels from inner tubes, styrofoam, and rusted car parts. This led to thousands of deaths. On August 15, 1994, the Coast Guard rescued 282 Cuban rafters, the most in one day since the Mariel boat lift. On August 19th, a new record was reached with 745. President Clinton announced that all rescued rafters would be sent to Guantanamo Naval Base, detained indefinitely or stayed home. This marked the first time that the American government denied Cuban refugees entry to our country. It is hard to imagine what the Balsero experience was truly like. The intense levels of danger, risk, and bravery involved are obvious. 1 in every 3 rafters didn't make it. Many who did survive the voyage spent almost a year at Guantanamo Bay, behind barbed wire in what felt like prison camps. In 1995, President Clinton enacted the wet foot, dry foot policy in response to an influx of 35,000 Cubans in 1994 by rafts or makeshift boats. This policy stated that if a Cuban makes it to U.S. soil, he may stay. If, however, he's picked up by the U.S. Coast Guard, he'll be sent back to Cuba. For those immigrants who did make it to the U.S., it was fairly easy to gain citizenship and benefits from American residency. Many immigrants from the Balsero generation situated themselves in southern Florida and New Jersey.